Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Thanks so much for stopping by. As always, I really appreciate it. And lots of you watched my last video. So again, thank you so much for that. That was also really appreciated. If you didn't see that video, I'll put a link somewhere up there. But in that video, I was going through the benefits of both of the systems that I use for bird photography, namely my Nikon Z8 500mm PF and my OM1 and the Olympus 300mm f4. Now that video generated a lot of discussion in the comments, which is what I aimed for. And again, I really appreciate anybody who took the time to contribute to that video. So thanks so much for that. Much appreciated. I was really happy to read and answer your opinions in the comments. It's great to have some interaction with you all. As always, when discussing camera gear, things can start getting a little bit tribal sometimes, and people's brand bias can sometimes come to the fore. Now, that wasn't really the intention of the video. I have built up two systems over a long period of time. I had a Nikon years ago, but I had a couple of nice lenses. I stopped using that camera. I then went into micro four thirds, but I always held on to those Nikon lenses in the hope that in the future, when I had the money and if a camera came out that I was interested in, I would get a Nikon camera and go back to using Nikon in conjunction with my OM1. I have on numerous occasions in the comments on videos I've made or posts I've put on Facebook blogs or somewhere else on the internet, I've been often asked questions. Those are great pictures you've taken with the OM1. How do they compare to pictures you take with your Nikon stuff? And vice versa. And that video was just me highlighting what I thought each camera was good at and maybe not so good at. As I think, because I've been using both cameras extensively for bird photography, I feel I've got a pretty good understanding and knowledge. There was a couple of comments that suggested I'm only targeting towards people who've got a lot of money, and that was totally not my intention. I realised that people who are starting out in bird photography, they're not quite sure if it's a hobby that they're going to pursue. They don't want to spend a lot of money on an OM1 or a Nikon Z8. I realise they're expensive. Not everyone can afford that. So I totally realise getting an expensive camera and an expensive lens is a big investment, but it is absolutely not needed if you want to take great photos. When I started out, I was using budget gear just like everybody else starting out, and over time I built up a bigger collection of lenses, which took a lot of time and planning and careful selling of lenses that I wasn't using anymore, and then waiting until I found good used deals. I have never bought a birding lens new. I've only ever bought used. If you know the lens you want and you wait and wait and wait, you can sometimes get a good deal, especially on lenses that were made for older DSLRs that you can adapt to mirrorless cameras, which is what I do with my Nikon 500 PF. So I want to stress that gear is only a small percentage of making a great shot. Experience, knowledge of your subject, understanding light and composition, visualizing the shot, all of these with just experience in the field are much more important than the latest and greatest. I take much better shots now than I did 5 years ago, and none of that is really because of gear. It's because I've spent a lot of time practicing in the field, working on my skills. And this is an absolute passion of mine. I want to be the best I can be, like anything in life. And I'm very fortunate to have the gear I have, but most of the time it's definitely not the gear that gets me the shots that I am really happy with. All the main camera manufacturers these days are making amazing gear, and they're probably all pretty similar. The person holding the camera is the one that makes the shot, not the gear or how expensive it is. I think there are almost as many great photographers making amazing images with old gear, which would cost not very much on the used market, as there are average photographers making average shots with really expensive gear, and they've just gone out and bought the latest and greatest without really investing in skills first. If you want to improve your photography, you don't necessarily have to go out and spend a lot of money on the latest gear. And I just want to share a few ideas how I think you could potentially take photography to the next level without upgrading. Photography is full of people who have GAS, G-A-S, gear acquisition syndrome. And they're always on the blogs and online looking at what the latest and greatest camera is. And people are just constantly upgrading. And they didn't even spend the time to really find out what the camera that they currently own can do. They just thought, oh, this newer camera has a faster frame per second or more megapixels. that's never going to get you to where you want to be. You've got to use the camera that you've got, really work out how to get the best photos from that camera and the lens that you already have. Just constantly upgrading is not going to improve your photography. Right, so the first thing I think you can do if you want to take your photography to the next level is to really start thinking about your photography. When I started photography, I just really got into bird photography and I was hooked really quickly. And I would just always just go out every day, not think about where I'm going, just go to the same old locations and just shoot any bird I saw. And I took a million shots of lots of different species. None of them were particularly good, and I did that for years. Yes, you photograph a lot of species, and yes, amongst all those shots, you'll get some lucky, great shots. That's not going to improve your photos very quickly. I mean, for the first 2 years, I was shooting in JPEG, and I'd read all the stuff about you need to shoot in RAW, but I just didn't take it on board. You absolutely need to shoot in RAW. You might think you're getting great shots with JPEG now, and you can do. You might get lucky with the lighting, and you don't need to edit it, but 95% of shots you need to edit. RAW means it's so much easier to edit. JPEGs are difficult to edit. You literally can only move the slider a little bit either way. RAW, you've got a lot more scope for editing. So yeah, what I used to do, I used to just turn up at a location and just see a bird shoot, see a bird shoot. I would suggest that's not the best way to get long-term improvement and to get shots that you'll be happy with in 5 or 10 years. I think it's much better to think about where you're going and what species you want to photograph. Or do that in reverse, think about what species you want to photograph and then research where you can find those species. eBird is a great tool online. You can look at your location or the location that you're thinking of going, seeing what species are there, and then you can target that species. So maybe when you go to a location in the future, only target 1 or 2 species and think about how you can get the best shots of those species. Of course, if you're there and a kingfisher lands on the perch in front of you, by all means, get the best shots you can possible of what's there. I try now to have a primary target where I'm going somewhere. If I don't find it, then I'll make alterations when I get there. But I try to target a certain species. I would say you want to get 8 out of 10 shots of a couple of species rather than lots of 5 out of 10 shots of loads of species. How do you know if a shot is 6 out of 10 or 8 out of 10? Go online. There are loads of photo galleries online you can look at. I've got Flickr on in the background there, which I like using. It's just really easy to navigate. If I know I'm going to go somewhere tomorrow, I want to get a shot of that species, I can go into the search thing on here, put in that species, see the shots that other people have taken, and then I can try to either try and take a different style of shot of that same species or try to at least equal or better the shots that I've looked at. So you can use some of these galleries online as a really useful resource to think about the shots you want when you next go out. But there's lots of galleries online. There's Flickr, there's Google Photos, there's 500px, there's loads of them. So I've been using Flickr for about 15 years, and what's really rewarding is about 15 years ago when I started using Flickr, I would look at certain photographers' photos and think, how have they done that? Their shots are amazing. I'm never going to get to be as good as them. Between me and you, I look at those same photographers now, and they still take great shots, but I feel I have definitely equaled or maybe surpassed them in some cases, and that's really rewarding, and that's through the fact that I've put in so many hours over the years. You know, it's not a competition. They are still great photographers. I still love looking at their pictures, but literally I used to look at them thinking, I'm never going to be that good, and now I think I am in the same bracket as them. And that's really rewarding, and that's because I've put the time in myself. I've never had a photography class in my life, totally self-taught, and I use, you know, I'm always trying to get better. And even when you get a new camera, if you think that, oh, I'm not taking as good a pictures as I should do, go on a Flickr, put the name of the camera in the search and see what other people are getting with that camera. See what the max ISO people are using. See what shutter speed they're using for birds in flight. And then think to yourself, right, well, they're getting great shots with the camera, it must be me. And then troubleshoot how you can get better with that camera. Visualization is really important when you're taking photos. So if I'm going out tomorrow morning to photograph a shorebird, I've probably been to that location before. Now every time you go to a location, you don't come away with great photos. But if sometime you go to a location and the tide's not as you expected or there's no birds about, it's not a wasted trip. Look how the tide is. Look how high the tide goes on high tide. Look how low it goes on low tide. Look at where the sun is and at what time of the day you should be there. And then next time you go, you can think, right, the sun was really nice at that particular time. When the tide goes out, it goes right out. If I put my Wellington boots on, I can go out into the tide. So use all that information you're collecting when you first go to that location to then visualize the shot you want in the future. So recently I was shooting shorebirds, and I went out on my boots into the ocean, and there was, in the far off distance, there was like a peninsula going that way, and then there was another peninsula going that way, and there was just a little area where it was just clear into the background. And because I was really low down, I was getting very wet, I had my camera just above the sea, I went out to about, the water was about, I don't know, a foot deep, and I remember there was just that small area, and that's where I wanted the birds to be. And I went back, and there was a black spoonbill, and they're endangered birds, beautiful birds, and it let me get pretty close to it, and I waited and waited and waited. I got a million shots of it with the peninsula in the background, but I didn't like that, and I just had to wait when it was in that small area, and that's when I got the shot that I wanted. But I knew that before I got there. As I was walking out, I put my waders on, and I walked out into the ocean, and as I walked out, I thought, A, is the spoonbill still there? He was. And B, is he going to be where I want him to be? And luckily he was, and everything came together, and I got a shot of when he was in that small space with a clear background into the distance, and I was really happy with that shot. So visualize the shot you want, and that can be for anything, even if you're taking pictures of birds in your garden. Like, you can think, right, well, there's lots of pictures online of a robin on a stick, but you can visualize, as it's your garden, you can think about, well, where are some nice flowers, or what does the robin do in my garden? What can I get? What unique shot can I get in my garden that's different from all the other shots on there? And again, visualize, and then next time you're in the garden and that robin turns up, rather than just getting a load of sharp shots of it on a stick, which there are millions of, see if you can change it up a bit, get something slightly original, and that comes through visualization. Obviously, things like background and being eye level with the bird is really important. I love a clear background, so at all times possible, I'm trying to get eye level with the bird. I don't really like taking pictures of birds with the blue sky high up above me. Sometimes it works, but I don't really like that. I like it when the bird comes down and is eye level with me. Even birds in flight. Obviously birds in flight can't be eye level all the time because they don't fly that low to the ground. But if they're in the distance and they're coming relatively low, it can look eye level. Like this shot here. He was obviously higher than me. He was high up in the sky, and he was going into the field behind me. He became lower and lower and lower, and I knew he was going to go in front of these distant trees for a split second, and that's the only shot I wanted, and that's how I got that shot. So backgrounds are important, getting eye level with a bird, that's a huge thing. There are so many shots on there of photographers taking shots of birds like that, and it just doesn't make a pleasing shot. If they had just, and it's obviously not a shy bird, it's just a bird in a field. If that person had just taken the camera, use your flip up screen and just put the camera lower, it would have got more eye level with the bird, the background would have then been further away, and there would have been a bigger connection with the bird. It would have been a more pleasing shot. And I just think so many people don't realize that. Get eye level with the bird if you can. I think a big thing that took me years to realize is sometimes there's no shot. Sometimes you see people post photos online asking other people's opinions, and they go, what do you think about this shot? And it's a bird far off in the distance with loads of branches, and they're like, how can I improve this shot? Why isn't it that sharp? Well, so honestly, it's not a shot. Just because the bird was there, if you couldn't get closer, it's just not a shot. You got a record shot, and that's great, but you have to go back next time, or you have to think about, right, the bird's in that far off tree, I can't access it for whatever reason, I can't get closer. But then watch the bird's behavior. Maybe every 20 minutes he flies to another perch just for 2 minutes and then goes back to that distant tree. Well, you need to focus on the perch then. And then so next time you go, think about, is there a way I can get closer to that perch you sometimes go to? Or you need to find another bird of the same species in a different location. There isn't always a shot. And sometimes, the more experienced I got, the more I realized that. Sometimes you just have to go home empty-handed. So if the bird is far away, figure out how you're going to get closer. But it's far away today, there's no shot to be had, unfortunately. You've got to save it for another day. There are lots of ways to improve your photography, but what I want to stress today is buying the most expensive gear is not one of them. And my intention in that last video was certainly not saying you need to buy an expensive Nikon Z6ii and you need to buy an expensive lens. Everybody collects gear over time. If you've just bought an expensive camera, you don't have a budget to buy a lens. You've got to use the lens you have. But that's fine. You can still get great shots with the gear you've got if you implement the skills and experience you're gaining every time you go out. So it's never a wasted trip out. Always things you can learn, things you can practice. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Again, chuck in the comments below other things that you think can help improve your photography rather than buying new gear. Thanks so much. I always appreciate you watching. Take care and see you on the next one. Bye.